Nestled in the mountains between Spain and France lies a language unlike any other on earth. This is Euskara, the Basque language, a true linguistic mystery spoken by nearly 1 million people. It shares no family ties with Spanish or French, no connection to Latin, and no clear link to any known language family in the world. By the end of our journey, you will understand how this ancient tongue survived against all odds, revealing a lost chapter of human history. We will uncover its bizarre grammatical rules, investigate wild theories connecting it to Stone Age hunters or distant Caucasian tribes, and follow the dramatic story of its near extinction and stunning revival. How is it possible for a language to stand completely alone for thousands of years? What does its survival tell us about the deepest past of Europe? What secrets about our own origins are locked within its unique words? So what exactly is this linguistic enigma called Euskara? The most startling fact is its profound isolation. While nearly every language in Europe belongs to a large family, like the Romance languages descended from Latin or the Germanic tongues from the north, Basque stands entirely alone. Linguists classify it as a language isolate, a language with no proven genetic relationship to any other living language on the planet. It is a solitary tree in a forest of interconnected relatives. This is not a mere dialect or a strange offshoot of Spanish. It is a completely separate entity with its own ancient roots buried deep in time. Today, its heartland is a small but vibrant region straddling the border of Spain and France. It holds co-official status in the Basque Autonomous Community and Navarre in Spain, and it is spoken in parts of the French Basque Country. Imagine a map of Europe, and then picture a tiny, resilient patch of color on the western edge of the Pyrenees Mountains, a region that has stubbornly held onto its unique voice for millennia. This is the home of Euskara. After facing centuries of pressure and a steep decline, the language is now protected by vigorous revival efforts. Schools teach in Basque, television and radio broadcast in it, and a new generation is proudly reclaiming this piece of their heritage. The story of where it is spoken today, however, is just a faint echo of the vast territory it once occupied. To truly grasp the mystery of Euskara, you must listen to its structure. A single Basque verb can tell an entire story. Where English or Spanish would use several separate words, Basque often weaves the subject, the direct object, and even the indirect object directly into the verb itself. It is like a tiny, self-contained sentence. For instance, the phrase, "I gave it to you," can be expressed as one densely packed word, dessert. This single unit carries the meaning of I, you, and it, all bound together in a grammatical knot that is completely foreign to its neighboring languages. This complex verb system is just the beginning. The language operates on a fundamentally different logical framework, something linguists call an ergative absolutive case system. Now, that sounds technical, but the concept is powerful. In most European languages, the subject of a sentence, whether it is doing the action or having the action done to it, is treated the same way. Think of the sentence, "He sees the dog." He is the subject doing the seeing. Now reverse it. The dog sees him. The dog is now the subject. In languages like English or Spanish, both he and the dog hold the same grammatical power when they are the ones performing the action. But Basque does not see it that way. In the Basque mind, the one who performs an action, the agent, is fundamentally different from the one who simply exists or receives an action. So, in a sentence like, "The man sees the dog," the word for "the man" would get a special suffix marking him as the actor. The word for "the dog," the one being seen, would remain in its basic, absolute form. This means the language makes a strict grammatical distinction between doing and being, a perspective that is rare in Europe but connects Basque to distant tongues like Georgian in the Caucasus or Mayan in Central America. This alien structure is mirrored perfectly in its vocabulary. While Spanish and French are overflowing with words borrowed from Latin, the ancient language of Rome, Basque's core vocabulary stands defiantly apart. For everyday, fundamental concepts, it uses its own native words. The word for house is ex, not a derivative of the Latin casa. The word for mother is ama, not mater or mere. The word for fire is su, completely distinct from fuego or feu. This near-total absence of Latin roots for basic ideas is a colossal clue. It tells us that when the Romans arrived with their legions and their language, the Basque language was already ancient, already complete, and so deeply rooted that it resisted the linguistic conquest that transformed the rest of the region. Its foundational words were not borrowed because they did not need to be. They were already there, spoken by a people whose identity was forged long before Rome was even a village. So we have a language with a unique grammatical soul and a native vocabulary untouched by Europe's great linguistic empires. This profound isolation points to a single, inescapable conclusion. The origins of Euskara must be sought in a time before history, in the shadowy depths of a prehistoric Europe whose other voices have long since fallen silent. This grammatical and lexical fortress points back to a time before the map of Europe was redrawn by a single, monumental event. The most compelling theory explaining Basque solitude is that it is the last surviving whisper of the languages spoken across Western Europe before the arrival of the Indo-Europeans. So who were these world-changing people? They were not a single nation, but a vast collection of tribes believed to have originated in the steppes north of the Black Sea. Beginning around 5,000 years ago, they began an extraordinary expansion, migrating outward in waves, their horses and chariots carrying them across continents. Wherever they went, their language spread and evolved, eventually branching into the incredible linguistic family that dominates the globe today. This Indo-European family includes most of the languages of Europe, from English and German in the north to Spanish and Italian in the south, and stretches all the way to India, giving us languages like Hindi and Persian. Their arrival in Europe was a cultural and linguistic tsunami that washed over the continent, completely overwhelming the existing linguistic landscape. Before this great wave, Europe was a mosaic of diverse peoples, each with their own unique tongue. Linguists refer to these lost languages as Paleo-European. They were the original voices of the continent, spoken by the ancient hunter-gatherers and early farmers who had lived there for thousands of years. As the Indo-European speakers spread, their languages either replaced these older tongues entirely or absorbed them, leaving behind only faint traces. Imagine an animation of Europe where a new color representing the Indo-European languages slowly spreads from the east, covering the entire map. It floods the plains, fills the valleys, and climbs the mountains. But in one small, rugged corner in the High Pyrenees, a tiny patch of the original color holds firm, refusing to be washed away. That lone patch is Euskara. This theory posits that Basque is not just an old language. It is a direct, unbroken descendant of one of those original Paleo-European languages. It is a living fossil, a time capsule preserving the sound and structure of a world that vanished everywhere else. So who were the people who first spoke this ancestral tongue? Archaeologists point to cultures that thrived in this very region at the end of the last ice age. The Magdalenian hunters, famous for their stunning cave art in places like Altamira, or their successors, the Azilian culture, these were not nomadic newcomers. They were deeply established populations, adapted to the challenging terrain of the Pyrenees and the Cantabrian coast. Their sophisticated toolkits and rich symbolic art suggest complex societies with stable territories and deep-rooted traditions. It is not difficult to imagine that the linguistic identity of the Basque people, their unique way of seeing and describing the world, was forged in the very same caves where their ancestors painted bison and horses onto stone walls thousands of years earlier. If this hypothesis is correct, then every sentence spoken in Euskara today is an echo from a time when mammoths still walked the earth. But the mystery deepens beyond that single, surviving patch of color on the map. The Vasconic substrate theory proposes a breathtaking idea. Basque was not always confined to its mountainous refuge. It, or a whole family of closely related languages, once blanketed a vast territory from the Iberian Peninsula deep into what is now southern France. This was not a single language but a Vasconic linguistic layer, a foundational stratum upon which later languages were built. The evidence for this lost world is hidden in the most enduring features of the landscape, its ancient place names. Across Spain and France, many of the oldest river names share peculiar, repetitive endings that defy explanation in Latin or Celtic. You find rivers named Arona, Salona, or Diva. You find towns with names like Arcana or Devama. Linguists argue that these suffixes, like ona and ama, are not random. They appear to be relics of a Vasconic grammatical structure fossilized in geography. The Basque word for good is on, and it is plausible that a root meaning good could be embedded in a river name, perhaps describing a beneficial water source. This is the linguistic equivalent of an archaeological dig, where the artifacts are not pottery shards but syllables, preserved for millennia in the names of places. Imagine a map of Western Europe 2,500 years ago. A vibrant, Vasconic color covers a wide swath of land from the Pyrenees north into Aquitaine and west across much of the Iberian Peninsula. This is the proposed extent of the Vasconic languages. Then, slowly, new colors begin to spread. From the north and east comes a Celtic wave, its languages washing over the interior. Then from the south and east, the relentless tide of Latin, the language of Roman legions and administrators, begins its conquest. Later still, after the fall of Rome, a Germanic language, Visigothic, adds another layer. Each new wave of language encroaches on the Vasconic territory, shrinking it, absorbing its speakers, and eventually erasing the living tongue from most of the map. But languages, especially deeply rooted ones, do not vanish without a trace. They leave a ghostly imprint, a substrate, in the new languages that replace them. This is why the place names remain, like linguistic fossils proving the existence of a creature thought to be extinct. The Vasconic languages were pushed back, mile by mile, century by century, until all that was left was the impregnable redoubt of the Pyrenees. This theory transforms the story of Euskara. It is no longer just the tale of a single, stubborn language that survived. It is the story of a lost linguistic continent, of which the Basque Country is the last surviving mountaintop. This unique language could not have survived without an equally unique people to carry it forward. The mystery of Euskara leads us directly to the DNA of the Basque people themselves. Modern genetics has uncovered a startling truth that mirrors their linguistic isolation. The Basque population possesses a genetic signature that stands apart from their Spanish and French neighbors. They have some of the highest frequencies of the Rh-negative blood type in the entire world. This is just one visible marker of a much deeper genetic distinctiveness that has been preserved over millennia. Think of Europe's population as a tapestry woven from many different threads, representing the various peoples who migrated and mixed over thousands of years. For most Europeans, that tapestry is a complex blend, but for the Basques, the pattern is strikingly simple, dominated by a single, ancient thread that is far less common everywhere else. Major genetic studies have shown that Basques are largely the direct descendants of the early Neolithic farmers who first brought agriculture to the Iberian Peninsula over 7,000 years ago. These pioneering settlers arrived from the Near East, cultivating the land and establishing stable communities. Their genetic legacy forms the bedrock of much of southern Europe. But what makes the Basques so special is what happened next. When later waves of people moved into Europe, such as the steppe pastoralists from the east who carried the Indo-European languages, they mixed extensively with the existing farming populations. This created the blended genetic profile we see across most of the continent today. The Basque region, however, was different. Its rugged, mountainous terrain acted as a natural fortress, not just militarily, but genetically and culturally. These later migratory waves had a significantly smaller impact here. The existing population was larger, more established, and more resistant to replacement or large-scale mixing. The result was that the early farmer genetic signature, which was diluted elsewhere, remained remarkably pure among the Basques. This is not to say they are a completely separate species or that they have no outside ancestry, but their genetic profile shows a much stronger and more direct connection to those first farmers than almost any other group in Western Europe. Their genetic isolation and their linguistic isolation are two sides of the same ancient coin. The same mountains that protected their unique genes also protected their unique words. The people who built those first stone farmsteads and cultivated the land were likely the very people who spoke the ancestral form of Euskara. Their language and their lineage became intertwined, passing down through an unbroken chain of generations in the same secluded valleys. This creates a powerful and rare convergence of evidence. The language points to a pre-Indo-European origin, and the genetics confirm a deep, localized ancestry with minimal disruption from the very migrations that brought those Indo-European languages to Europe. The survival of the Basque people and their language is therefore a single, continuous story of resilience. But if their roots are so deeply anchored in the Neolithic era, what about the wild theories that connect them to a much older, even more mysterious group of people, the original hunter-gatherers of Europe? Could Euskara be the last echo of the Ice Age itself? Yet this genetic story holds a fascinating twist. The idea that the Basques are purely the descendants of Neolithic farmers is now being challenged by cutting-edge research into ancient DNA. It turns out their unique profile may not just come from the first farmers, but also from the very people those farmers encountered when they arrived. We are talking about Europe's original inhabitants, the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who lived here for thousands of years before agriculture. For a long time, scholars believed the spread of farming was a story of replacement. It was thought that waves of new farmers moved in from the east, displacing or outright replacing the local hunter-gatherer populations. The evidence from the Basque Country, however, paints a very different picture. Recent studies of ancient skeletons reveal that the Basques have a significantly higher proportion of hunter-gatherer ancestry than most of their neighboring populations in Spain and France. This suggests a pivotal historical event. When farming culture reached the Western Pyrenees, it was not necessarily brought by a massive influx of new people who erased the old ones. Instead, it appears the local hunter-gatherer communities already living in the region chose to adopt the new technology of farming for themselves. They learned to cultivate crops and domesticate animals, transitioning to a new way of life without being genetically swamped by outsiders. This was a cultural adoption, not a population replacement. The existing people, with their unique language and genes, simply integrated a new economic system into their ancient society. This crucial nuance transforms our understanding of Basque prehistory. Their genetic distinctiveness is not a snapshot of one single migration, the Neolithic farmers. It is a unique blend, a deep reservoir of both early farmer and even older hunter-gatherer ancestry that was mixed and then preserved in isolation. While other regions of Europe saw later migrations dilute this ancient genetic cocktail, the Basque Mountains acted as a protective vessel. This means the Basque people are not just the children of the agricultural revolution. They are also the direct heirs of the ancient hunter-gatherers who painted the caves of Altamira, people who had already called this land home for millennia. So what does this mean for their language? If their lineage stretches back so decisively to the pre-farming era, could Euskara itself be far older than we ever suspected? Could it be a linguistic relic not just from the time of the first farmers, but from the world of the last Ice Age hunters? This possibility pushes the origins of Basque into a shadowy, almost mythical past. Could this linguistic island have once been part of a larger archipelago? Another compelling, though highly debated, theory suggests a lost kinship between Basque and the mysterious language of the ancient Iberians. Before Rome's legions marched across the peninsula, the eastern and southern coasts of what is now Spain were home to a sophisticated culture known as the Iberians. They had their own distinctive art, social organization, and most importantly for our mystery, their own unique writing system. The Iberian script found carved on lead sheets and stone slabs is a tantalizing puzzle. We can read the letters as the script is partially deciphered, but the language itself remains a profound enigma, its meaning locked away. This wall of silence fuels endless speculation. Could the undeciphered words on those ancient tablets be a long-lost cousin to Euskara? Some scholars have pointed to intriguing, though faint, clues. Certain place names and personal names recorded from the Iberian period bear a resemblance to Basque words. For instance, the Iberian town name Iliberri looks strikingly similar to the Basque words for new town, Iri-Berri. The name Bisut has been compared to the Basque Baserri, meaning farmstead. These echoes are haunting, suggesting a conversation across the centuries. Yet, for most modern linguists, these whispers are not enough to prove a family tie. The prevailing view is that these similarities are not evidence of a common ancestral language, but rather the result of two neighbors living side by side for centuries. They likely borrowed words from each other, or more profoundly, they both drew from the same deep well, the ancient Vasconic substrate layer that once underlay much of the region. They were not sister languages born from the same mother tongue, but rather two distinct languages influenced by the same prehistoric linguistic landscape. So while the Iberian theory offers a captivating vision of a lost peninsula united by language, the evidence points not to a direct relative but to a fascinating neighbor whose own secrets died with them, leaving Basque once again in solitary majesty. The idea of a lost tribe from a distant land has always captivated the human imagination. This brings us to one of the most intriguing and hotly debated theories, a proposal that Basque is not entirely alone after all, but has a long-lost relative separated by thousands of miles. The theory points east all the way to the soaring peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, suggesting a deep kinship with languages like Georgian. What could possibly connect these two distant corners of the world? The link lies in that very same complex grammatical feature, ergativity. Both Basque and languages of the Caucasian family, such as Georgian, structure their sentences around that same fundamental distinction between the one who acts and the one who is acted upon. For early 20th century linguists, this was a stunning parallel. It seemed too specific, too profound to be a simple coincidence. Their minds raced to a grand historical narrative. They envisioned a vast, ancient migration, a journey of epic proportions where a people traveled from the Caucasus, carrying their unique language across continents until they reached the Pyrenees, where they settled and became the Basques. It was a perfect lost tribe story, a romantic answer to a profound mystery. Why would modern linguists armed with more data than ever largely set this captivating idea aside? The consensus now leans toward a phenomenon called typological convergence. This is the idea that languages, even when completely unrelated, can independently develop similar complex features simply because they are efficient solutions to the same communicative problems. Think of it like two isolated cultures inventing the wheel. They did not copy each other, they both arrived at the same brilliant idea because it works. In the same way, the challenging, mountainous terrain of both the Pyrenees and the Caucasus may have fostered isolated, tight-knit communities where complex, self-contained grammar was a useful tool, leading both languages to stumble upon ergativity independently. There is also the glaring absence of shared basic vocabulary. If the languages were truly sisters, you would expect to see clear family resemblances in their words for mother, fire, or water, but these fundamental links are missing. So while the Caucasian connection provides a dramatic and human story of migration and kinship, the evidence suggests a different, perhaps even more remarkable truth. It shows us that two human societies at opposite ends of Europe with no contact could architect their worlds of words in such a strangely similar way. Amidst these grand theories of lost continents and ancient migrations, we finally discover something we can hold in our hands. Scattered across southwestern France are stone inscriptions from the time of the Roman Empire, known as the Aquitanian inscriptions. These are not long, poetic texts, but simple, powerful declarations. They are tombstones and votive offerings bearing the names of gods and people who lived over 2,000 years ago. And etched into that ancient stone are words that send a shiver down the spine of any linguist. One inscription mentions a woman named Andia. In modern Basque, Andia still means lady or woman. Another records a name, Nescoto. Today, the Basque word for girl is Nescoto. The connection is undeniable, immediate. Here, frozen in the landscape north of the Pyrenees, is the ghost of a language that is recognizably the ancestor of modern Euskara. This is not a speculative link based on grammar or place names. This is direct, personal evidence. We are reading the names of real individuals, people who lived and died in the shadow of the Roman Empire, and their very identities are written in a Proto-Basque tongue. The Aquitanian inscriptions prove something monumental. They confirm that a language nearly identical to Basque was not just a Pyrenean phenomenon, but was firmly established in a much wider territory, stretching well into what is now France during classical antiquity. This narrows the gap between the deep prehistoric theories and the historical record. It places Euskara on the map at a time when Latin was the language of power and administration, showing that it was already a distinct and resilient force. These stones are the missing pieces that anchor the Basque language firmly in time and space, transforming it from a purely theoretical mystery into a documented historical reality. So we know it was there, defiantly spoken while empires rose and fell around it. But how did this ancient language, against all odds, manage to survive into the modern world? The legions of Rome conquered the world with sword and syllable, yet their linguistic victory was not absolute. When the empire's armies marched into the Basque lands, they encountered a different kind of terrain and a different kind of people. Unlike the fertile plains of Gaul or the accessible coasts of Hispania, which were rapidly integrated and Latinized, the core Basque territory proved a tough nut to crack. Imagine the Roman roads, those masterpieces of engineering that bound the empire together, snaking through the valleys but often bypassing the deepest, most rugged heart of the Pyrenees. Major Roman cities were established on the fringes, like Pompelo, modern-day Pamplona, but the dense network of towns and villas that defined Roman economic life in other provinces never fully took root in these secluded valleys. This relative lack of intensive Roman settlement was a shield. Without a constant, overwhelming presence of Latin-speaking administrators, landowners, and merchants, the pressure to abandon Euskara was significantly less. The old ways and the old language could persist in the villages tucked away from the main thoroughfares. The relationship was not purely one of resistance, however. The Basques were pragmatic. Historical records suggest that Basque men, famed as hardy warriors, often served as auxiliary troops in the Roman army. These soldiers would have learned Latin for military commands and communication, but they would have returned to their homeland, to their families, speaking their native tongue. They participated in the Roman system without being absorbed by it, maintaining a distinct cultural identity even while serving a foreign empire. This combination of geographical refuge, limited economic integration, and a fiercely guarded sense of self created a perfect storm for survival. Latin lapped at the shores of the Basque country like a great ocean, but it never managed to flood the highest ground. the fall of Rome did not mean the end of Basque resilience, it simply changed the stage. From the political rubble of the old empire, a new power emerged in the Pyrenees, one that would become the greatest protector the language ever knew. This was the Kingdom of Navarre. For over 6 centuries, this independent Basque kingdom stood as a mighty political and cultural fortress, a sovereign state where Euskara was not just a village tongue, but the language of the court, the law, and the crown. While other minority languages across the peninsula were slowly being marginalized by the rising dominance of kingdoms like Castile and Aragon, Euskara enjoyed the ultimate shield, state-level institutional support. Navarre was not a remote backwater. It was a key player in the complex drama of medieval Spain, especially during the long centuries of the Reconquista, the Christian reconquest of the peninsula from Muslim rule. Navarrese kings and knights fought alongside and sometimes against their Castilian and Aragonese rivals, carving out a strategic territory that straddled the Pyrenees. This position gave the kingdom immense influence, but it also placed it squarely between powerful and ambitious neighbors. The royal court in Pamplona became a vibrant center where Basque culture and language thrived under the patronage of its monarchs. Decrees were issued, histories were written, and diplomacy was conducted with the knowledge that this kingdom was the last, best hope for preserving a unique identity. The very existence of a Basque state provided a social and political gravity that kept the language from fracturing or fading. It cemented Euskara's prestige, proving it was capable of governing a nation, not just surviving in isolated valleys. This institutional embrace meant that for a noble, a merchant, or a soldier, speaking Basque was a mark of belonging to a powerful and independent realm. But this golden age of sovereignty could not last forever. The kingdom's strategic location became its greatest vulnerability, caught in the relentless tug of war between the growing giants of Castile to the west and France to the north. Through a web of dynastic marriages, political alliances, and outright military conflicts, the independence of Navarre was steadily eroded. The southern part of the kingdom was finally annexed by the rising power of Castile in the early 16th century, a blow from which the Basque political project would never fully recover. The northern fragment lingered as a separate kingdom in personal union with France, but its distinct identity was slowly absorbed. With the fall of Navarre, the institutional backbone that had supported Euskara for centuries was shattered. The language lost its royal patron, its place in the halls of power, and was suddenly exposed to the full, concentrated pressure of the dominant state languages that now surrounded it. The fate of the Basque language was now tied not to the decrees of kings, but to the daily defiance of its people. A new weapon for the language's survival was forged not on a battlefield, but in a printing press in the year 1545. This was the Lingui Vasconum Primitiae, the first fruits of the Basque language, a humble collection of poems by a parish priest named Bernard Exeper. For the first time in history, Euskara was captured in ink and paper, a moment of profound defiance. Until that point, the language lived almost entirely in the spoken word, passed from parent to child, vulnerable to being dismissed as a mere rustic dialect. But here was proof, tangible and permanent, that Basque was every bit as capable of complex literary and religious expression as Latin or French. Exeper's work was a declaration of linguistic equality. His poems wove together Catholic doctrine with a fierce, unapologetic pride in his mother tongue. One line from his introductory verses has echoed for centuries as a rallying cry. He wrote, "Euskara jalgi hadi munjurat," Basque, go out into the world. It was a command, a plea, and a prophecy all in one, willing the language to break free from its mountain isolation and claim its place among the great languages of humanity. You can see the original pages, the archaic typeface making the words look like artifacts from another age. This book was more than poetry, it was a seed of standardization. To print a language, you must make choices about spelling and grammar. You must fix its fluid sounds into permanent forms. The Primitiae began that essential process, creating a reference point, a foundation upon which a modern literary tradition could one day be built. In a century that saw the final annexation of the Kingdom of Navarre, this book was a different kind of sovereignty, asserting that the Basque spirit and its unique voice would not be so easily silenced. Yet even the printing press could not shield the language from the relentless pressures of the modern state. The 19th century saw the rise of centralized governments in both Spain and France, nations determined to forge a single, unified national identity. In this new political climate, regional languages like Euskara were seen as a threat, backward remnants of a fractured past that had to be erased to create a homogeneous citizenry. Official policies actively suppressed the language, banning its use in schools, the courts, and public life. Speaking Basque became an act of defiance, but also a mark of shame imposed by a system that labeled its speakers as uneducated peasants. The language was pushed further into the shadows, its future looking bleaker than ever. Then, a polarizing and paradoxical figure emerged from this crisis, a man who would irrevocably change the destiny of Euskara, Sabino Arana. Arana was a man consumed by a singular mission, to save the Basque people from what he saw as cultural extinction. He looked at the industrializing world around him, the influx of Spanish-speaking workers into Basque cities, and he saw not progress but a deadly plague threatening to wipe out his people's soul. His response was to found Basque nationalism, a political movement built on two core pillars he considered sacred and non-negotiable: the purity of Basque blood and the uniqueness of the Basque language. He famously declared that while a Basque may learn Spanish, a Spaniard could never learn to be a Basque. For Arana, Euskara was not just a tool for communication, it was the ultimate proof of a separate and superior racial identity, a divine gift from God that set the Basque people apart. This was a radical and controversial weaponization of the language. He intertwined linguistic survival with ethnic purity in a way that was exclusionary and deeply problematic, creating a political ideology that was both fiercely protective and dangerously narrow. Yet from this divisive ideology sprang concrete actions that would prove vital for the language's survival. Seeing the bewildering array of Basque dialects as a weakness, Arana threw himself into the monumental task of standardization. He believed a fractured language could not unite a people, so he began crafting a unified grammar and a consistent orthography, laying the early groundwork for what would much later become Euskara Batua, the unified Basque that is taught today. He understood the power of symbols to rally a people, and with a clear, striking vision, he designed the Icarinha, the Basque flag. Its red background represents the Basque people. The green saltire symbolizes the oak tree of Germanic, an ancient symbol of Basque freedoms, and the white cross represents their Catholic faith. This flag became an instant and enduring emblem of a reclaimed identity, a visual declaration that the Basques were a nation. Sabino Arana's legacy is a profound contradiction. He was a man whose ideology was rooted in an exclusionary and racialist worldview, yet his practical work provided the essential tools for the language's modern revival. He gave a people on the verge of linguistic collapse a political cause, a standardized tongue, and a flag to rally around. His fervent nationalism, for all its dark edges, awakened a generation to the value of what they were about to lose forever. The darkest chapter in the modern story of Euskara began with the thunder of fascist artillery. Following the Spanish Civil War, General Francisco Franco established a dictatorship that would last for nearly 4 decades, and his regime viewed the Basque language as an enemy of the state. Franco's vision for Spain was one of absolute unity, a single nation bound by one language, one faith, and one flag. Regional identities were seen as a dangerous cancer, a threat to the very fabric of the country, and the Basque language became a primary target for eradication. Overnight, the public use of Euskara was declared illegal. It was stripped from schools, banned from government offices, and forbidden in all media. Public signs in Basque were torn down, and books were confiscated and burned. Speaking this ancient tongue on the street, in a shop, or in any official setting could bring swift and severe punishment. Police officers would impose fines for the simple act of conversation, and children in schoolyards were shamed and sometimes beaten for uttering a single word in the language of their parents. This was not just a policy of neglect, it was a systematic campaign of linguistic genocide designed to strangle the life out of a culture. The goal was clear: to force an entire people to forget the words their ancestors had spoken for thousands of years. A generation of children grew up being taught that their mother tongue was something ugly, something to be hidden, a mark of ignorance and rebellion. This created a devastating lost generation, a cohort of people who understood the language but were often unable or unwilling to speak it, severing the chain of oral transmission that had held strong since time immemorial. Yet, in the face of this brutal suppression, the Basque spirit did not break. It simply went underground. The true battle for survival moved from the public squares into the private spaces of homes and hidden basements. Determined parents and educators created a secret network of schools known as Ikastolak. These were clandestine classrooms held in private homes, church basements, and back rooms, where children could learn to read and write in the forbidden language. The teachers were often volunteers risking their freedom, and the lessons were conducted in whispers with lookouts posted to warn of approaching police. The production of books and newspapers continued in secret, with small, mobile printing presses churning out primers and newsletters that were distributed through a covert network of trusted families. The most profound resistance, however, happened around the kitchen table. Within the sanctity of their own homes, families made a conscious, defiant choice. They continued to speak Euskara to their children, preserving the sound and soul of the language in the one place the state could not fully control. This domestic fortress became the language's last redoubt. The very act of putting a child to bed with a Basque lullaby or sharing family stories in the old tongue became a quiet act of revolution. The Francoist regime, with all its power and terror, ultimately failed to comprehend that a language is more than a tool for public communication. It is the living breath of a people's identity. By trying to kill it, they only made it more precious, transforming Euskara from a simple means of talk into a powerful symbol of freedom and resistance. The oppression meant to extinguish the language forever had, paradoxically, forged it into a weapon and galvanized a revival movement that would explode into the open the moment the dictator was gone. Franco's death in 1975 did not just mark the end of a dictatorship, it unlocked the doors to a cultural revolution. The Basque language, forced into whispers for decades, emerged into the sunlight, ready to reclaim its voice. This was not a slow, gradual recovery, but a determined and systematic rebuilding from the ground up. The new Spanish Constitution of 1978 recognized the right to autonomy, and the Basque Country seized this historic opportunity. The Statute of Autonomy of 1979 was a landmark victory, granting Euskara co-official status alongside Spanish throughout the Basque autonomous community. For the first time in living memory, the language was not just permitted, it was protected by law, a tool of the state itself. This legal triumph ignited a societal transformation, powered by massive public investment and grassroots passion. The clandestine Ikastolak, the secret schools that had kept the language alive in basements, were now brought into the open and integrated into a comprehensive public education system. The government poured resources into creating a parallel school system where Euskara was not just a subject, but the primary language of instruction for every class, from mathematics to science to history. The results were staggering. In just a few decades, the number of children fluent in Basque skyrocketed. Today, over 90% of students in the Basque autonomous community are enrolled in either Basque-only or bilingual models. An entire generation has now grown up learning about the world through the lens of Euskara, ensuring its transmission not just in the home but in the classroom and the playground. The airwaves, once a forbidden space for the language, now hum with its sounds. The Basque Radio and Television Corporation, known as AITP, launched multiple television and radio channels broadcasting entirely in Euskara. Suddenly, families could watch the nightly news, laugh at sitcoms, and cheer for their local soccer team, all in their ancestral tongue. This was not a niche service. It became a central pillar of popular culture, normalizing the language in the most modern and engaging ways. Simultaneously, the regional government implemented a rigorous language policy for its own workforce. To work in public administration, from local town halls to regional ministries, civil servants were required to demonstrate proficiency in Basque. This created a powerful practical incentive for adults to learn the language, tying economic opportunity directly to cultural revival. The number of Basque speakers, which had plummeted to a fearful low, began a steady and remarkable climb. From fewer than 500,000 speakers in the 1970s, the figure has now surged to over 900,000, with the strongest growth consistently seen among the young. A language that was once a secret whispered in kitchens is now heard in government debates, university lectures, and hip-hop songs. This is the story of a phoenix rising, a testament to what a people can achieve when they decide that their voice will not be silenced. From the scattered whispers of its dialects, a single, clear voice was forged. This monumental task fell to the Euskaltzaindia, the Basque Language Academy, which in the 1960s embarked on a project that would define the language's modern era, the creation of Euskara Batua, or Unified Basque. For centuries, the language had survived not as one tongue, but as a constellation of distinct dialects, some so different from one another that a speaker from a western valley might struggle to understand a cousin from an eastern town. These were not mere accents, but deep variations in vocabulary, verb forms, and pronunciation, the natural result of communities living in isolated mountain valleys for generations. The Academy faced a delicate balancing act: how to build a common language without erasing the rich local identities that had sustained Euskara through its darkest hours. Their solution was not to pick one winning dialect and impose it on all others. Instead, linguists and scholars carefully constructed a new, standardized form, drawing the most common and logical features from the central dialects to create a cohesive grammatical core and a unified spelling system. Think of it as building a new, central town square where everyone from the surrounding villages could finally meet and understand each other, while still returning to their own unique homes. This new square, Euskara Batua, became the essential bridge that allowed the language to step onto the modern world stage. It provided the consistent framework needed for publishing textbooks, for writing legal documents, and for broadcasting news that could be clearly understood from Bilbao to Bayonne. Without this unified form, the explosion of Basque language schools, the AITP television network, and its official use in government would have been nearly impossible. How could you teach a national curriculum or draft a single law if every region used a different word for the same concept? Batua gave the revival movement its essential backbone. Yet, this triumph of practicality did not come without a deep and ongoing cultural conversation. Some purists and speakers of certain dialects worried that this new, invented standard would eventually smother the local varieties, the very forms that had kept the language alive for millennia. They saw Batua as artificial, a bureaucratic tool that lacked the soul and the deep-rooted history of the traditional dialects spoken in homes for generations. This tension between unity and diversity, between the needs of the future and the treasures of the past, remains a living debate within the Basque community today. It is a testament to the language's vitality that its speakers care so passionately about its soul, arguing not over whether it should survive, but over how its many voices should harmonize. The creation of Batua was not the end of a journey, but a bold new beginning, ensuring that an ancient language could speak with one strong, clear voice in the 21st century. That ancient language, forged in secret schools and mountain valleys, now pulses through the fiber optic cables of the digital world, Euskara has not only survived the 21st century, it is actively carving out a space within it. You can now set your smartphone's operating system to communicate entirely in Basque, from the home screen to the help menus. Major platforms like Facebook, Google, and Wikipedia offer full Basque language interfaces, the result of countless hours by volunteer translators who ensured their language would not be left behind on the information superhighway. This digital presence extends into the realm of entertainment, with popular video games like Minecraft and League of Legends fully localized into Euskara, allowing a new generation to build virtual worlds and coordinate team strategies in the ancient tongue of their ancestors. This is not a quaint preservation project, it is a vibrant, living ecosystem. The same language used to discuss livestock and farmland is now used to debate artificial intelligence and navigate social media. The sound of Euskara has also reached global audiences through its famous speakers. Professional athletes like Iker Casillas, the legendary Spanish goalkeeper, and Mikel Arteta, the manager of Arsenal Football Club, often speak Basque in international interviews, showcasing the language on the world's sports stage. In music, groups like Berry Tizarak have gained international followings in the punk rock scene, their powerful lyrics in Euskara resonating with listeners who may not understand the words but feel the raw emotion behind them. These modern ambassadors demonstrate that the language is not confined to a regional identity, but is a valid and dynamic medium for global expression. Yet for all this progress, significant challenges loom. The relentless tide of globalization and the overwhelming cultural dominance of Spanish and French continue to exert immense pressure. While the educational system has successfully produced a new generation of fluent speakers, the true test lies beyond the classroom walls. The concern is what linguists call language transfer, the moment a young person, fluent from school, moves into the professional world or social circles where Spanish or French is the default. Without a conscious effort to use Euskara in daily life, in workplaces, and in casual conversation, that hard-won fluency can fade, and the chain of natural transmission can break once more. The battle is no longer for survival in the legal sense, but for relevance in the mundane moments of everyday life. The ultimate goal is to make the choice to speak Basque feel not like a political statement, but as natural and effortless as breathing. You can see this vibrant contemporary struggle playing out on Basque television. Modern series produced by ITB are sleek, compelling dramas and comedies that rival anything produced in Madrid or Paris, but they are performed entirely in Euskara. They tell stories of modern relationships, corporate intrigue, and social issues, proving that the language is perfectly capable of handling any topic the modern world can throw at it. The screen glows not with images of a folkloric past, but with a confident, contemporary culture speaking its own mind in its own voice. The survival of Euskara is now a question played out in every text message sent, every video game played, and every television show watched. These everyday words are the heart of the mystery. To understand a people, you listen to the words they use for the world around them, for their family, and for their tools. In Basque, these foundational terms stand as silent monuments to an unknown past. Take the word for knife, aizto. This is not a borrowing from Latin or a cousin to the Spanish cuchillo. It is a native Basque word, and its origins are completely obscure. The same is true for ex, meaning house, a word that echoes in countless Basque farmstead names and has no clear relative in any other language. And then there is ama, mother, one of the first sounds a child makes, yet in Basque it belongs to no other family on earth. When you place these words side by side with their Indo-European counterparts, the chasm becomes undeniable. The word for mother in Sanskrit is mater, in Latin it is mater, and in English it is mother. You can hear the clear family resemblance, the common ancestral root that stretches from India to Iceland. But ama stands entirely outside this vast linguistic tree. It is a linguistic orphan. This pattern repeats for the most basic elements of life. The Basque word for fire, su, shares nothing with the Latin ignis or the Spanish fuego. The word for stone, Harry, is utterly distinct from Pedro or Pierre. These are not words for complex concepts or modern inventions. They are the bedrock vocabulary, the words a culture develops first and holds onto most tightly. Their unique nature tells a powerful story. It means that when the first Indo-European speakers arrived in Europe, bringing with them their own words for mother and fire and house, the ancestors of the Basques already had their own complete set. Their world was already named. There was no need to borrow the newcomers' terms for fundamental things because their own language was already rich and self-sufficient. This core vocabulary is the linguistic DNA of a lost world, a set of sounds and meanings that predate the great linguistic upheavals that reshaped the continent. Every time a Basque speaker says "oma," they are not just calling for their mother, they are uttering a syllable that may have been spoken in some form by Ice Age hunters gathered around a fire, a direct link to a world whose other voices have been silent for thousands of years. Even the way a culture counts can reveal its deepest past. The Basque language preserves a counting system that operates on a completely different logic from the languages that surround it. While Spanish, French, and English all use a decimal system based on the number 10, the traditional Basque method is Vaidsumal, rooted in the number 20. The word for 20 is hojai. To say 30, a Basque speaker would say hojai tahama, which translates literally as 20 and 10. 40 is berojai, a contraction implying two 20s. 60 becomes harajai, or three 20s, and so on. This is not a random peculiarity. It is a structured, ancient way of quantifying the world, built around scores rather than decades. Imagine counting not just on your fingers, but using your fingers and your toes together, reaching a natural total of 20 before starting a new cycle. This method feels intuitive and human scale, a system born from the body itself long before abstract mathematics. The persistence of this base 20 counting is another powerful piece of the puzzle. Most of Europe adopted the decimal system from the Indo-Europeans, whose languages are saturated with it. The survival of a Vaidsumal system in Basque, completely isolated from its neighbors, strongly suggests it predates that great linguistic wave. It is a fossilized mathematical concept, a numerical echo from the very people who first settled this land. When a modern speaker uses berojai for 40, they are unconsciously tapping into a cognitive framework that may have been used to count livestock, tally hunters, or track the days by their prehistoric ancestors. This is not just a different way of saying numbers, it is a different way of seeing quantity, preserved against all odds and offering one more tiny, yet profound, clue about the mysterious world from which Euskara first emerged. Could the stones themselves speak a lost language? This question leads us to one of the most speculative and captivating ideas in the search for Basque origins. Some researchers have proposed a breathtaking theory that the ancient builders of Europe's great stone circles, alignments, and tombs spoke languages related to Euskara. Imagine the architects of Stonehenge in England, the creators of the massive standing stones at Karnak in France, and the communities who erected thousands of dolmens along the Atlantic coast, all sharing a common linguistic heritage. The geographic distribution of these megalithic monuments is strikingly wide, forming a great arc from Scandinavia down the Atlantic facade to the Iberian Peninsula. This corridor of stone loosely mirrors the proposed map of the ancient Vasconic substrate, the lost linguistic layer hypothesized to have once blanketed Western Europe. It is a haunting overlap, a ghostly outline of a culture that may have moved both massive rocks and words across vast distances. The theory suggests that these megalithic builders were not just united by a common tradition of astronomy and engineering, but by a family of related tongues. In this grand vision, Euskara is not a solitary mystery, but the last living descendant of a vast European megalithic language. Of course, we must tread carefully here. There is no direct evidence, no inscribed stone at Stonehenge that we can read to confirm this idea. The cultures that built these monuments left behind no deciphered writings, only silent, towering testimonies in rock. This theory lies firmly in the realm of captivating speculation, a powerful what-if scenario that attempts to connect the dots between archaeology and linguistics. Yet the possibility is profoundly alluring. It transforms the Basque language from a regional survivor into the direct heir of the first great monumental builders of Europe. When you listen to Euskara today, are you hearing the faint, living echo of the conversations that once echoed around the bluestones of Stonehenge or amidst the granite forests of Karnak? It is a thought that lends an almost mythical weight to every syllable, connecting the words of a modern speaker to the ambitions of the first people to reshape the European landscape on a colossal scale. But who are the detectives entrusted with solving this ancient mystery? The Euskaltzaindia, the Royal Academy of the Basque language, stands as the official guardian of Euskara. This is no dusty committee of grammarians, but a living institution dedicated to both preserving the language's deep past and securing its dynamic future. Their mandate is profound: to regulate, protect, and promote Euskara in all its forms. They are the architects of Euskara Batua, the unified standard that gave the language a modern backbone, but their work delves far deeper than grammar rules. Think of them as the lead investigators on the ultimate cold case, a linguistic puzzle that stretches back into prehistory. Their laboratories are vast etymological dictionaries where every word is a potential clue. They trace the winding paths of terms like aisto for knife or ex for house, searching for any faint connection, any hint of a long-lost relative that could finally crack the case of Basque's solitary existence. This is patient, meticulous work, comparing Basque vocabulary not just to European tongues, but to languages from North Africa to the Caucasus, testing every possible thread. Yet their gaze is fixed firmly on the horizon as well. In a world of constant technological change, how does an ancient language say streaming service or cloud storage? The Euskaltzaindia actively coins new words, crafting modern terms from ancient Basque roots to ensure the language does not simply borrow from Spanish or English, but grows from within. They might combine existing words or repurpose old concepts, creating a vocabulary that feels both fresh and authentically Basque. This dual mission makes them more than scholars. They are cultural custodians, carefully piecing together the fragments of a prehistoric puzzle while simultaneously building the linguistic tools for the next generation. Every new word they approve, every etymological lead they chase, is another step in the endless task of safeguarding a voice that has spoken across the ages. This solitary language offers far more than a linguistic curiosity. It is a living bridge to a world that vanished everywhere else, a repository of ancient concepts and worldviews that would otherwise be utterly lost to us. When a Basque speaker uses a verb that weaves an entire story into one word, or counts in scores of 20, they are not just communicating. They are activating a cognitive framework that predates empires, a unique way of parsing reality that has survived against staggering odds. The preservation of Euskara is a monumental testament to human cultural resilience, proving that identity, when rooted deep enough, can withstand millennia of pressure. Its survival matters because it is a unique window into the prehistory of Europe, a window that, if closed, would leave us peering at the past with one eye shut. Imagine trying to understand the full history of life on Earth if we only had the fossils of large mammals, with all the insects, plants, and microorganisms forever erased. The loss of the Basque language would be a similar, catastrophic impoverishment of our collective human story. It would mean silencing the last native speaker of the languages that once echoed across ancient Europe, forever severing our most direct connection to the minds of its original inhabitants. This is not just a Basque story. It is a powerful chapter in the global struggle of indigenous and minority languages, from the Gaelic spoken in the Scottish Isles to the countless native tongues of the Americas and Australia that are fighting for their next breath. Each of these languages is not merely a collection of words, but an entire universe of knowledge, a unique philosophy encoded in grammar and poetry. When a language dies, we lose irreplaceable insights into human ingenuity, into local ecosystems, into alternative ways of being. Euskara's dramatic revival, from clandestine schools to digital domains, stands as a beacon of hope in this global fight. It demonstrates that with determination, legal protection, and cultural pride, even the most threatened voices can not only be saved but can thrive again. The story of this mysterious tongue ultimately reminds us that every language is a unique key to understanding what it means to be human, and that every time one falls silent, a part of our shared soul vanishes with it. From its baffling grammar to its prehistoric roots, the journey of Euskara is a testament to human resilience. We have explored a language that stands entirely alone, a linguistic island in Europe whose very structure forces us to see the world differently. The evidence points overwhelmingly to a pre-Indo-European origin, suggesting Basque is the sole surviving voice from the ancient peoples who inhabited Western Europe long before new languages washed over the continent. Its story is etched into the land itself, from the ghostly Vasconic place names scattered across Spain and France to the personal names carved into Aquitanian stones. This language endured the rise and fall of Rome, thrived within the shield of the Kingdom of Navarre, and survived a brutal, state-mandated suppression that forced it into whispers and secret schools. Its modern revival is nothing short of spectacular, a phoenix rising through education, media, and law to reclaim its place in the world. The Basque language is more than a mystery. It is a living fossil, a direct echo from a time before maps, before nations, before history as we know it. It reminds us that our world is far older and more mysterious than we often assume. The story of Euskara is not finished. It is still being written by its speakers every single day, in classrooms, on television screens, and in the quiet moments of daily life. What do you think is the most compelling piece of this incredible puzzle? Share your thoughts on this linguistic enigma in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the greatest mysteries of our past.